Hi guys, this is Bill from Spencer1984.com with another update to the Kelly's Heroes World War II Jeep. In the last video, we looked at the kit and its components, so this time around we're going to be looking at the assembled but not quite finished model. I'm going to start with under the hood, where you got a pretty decent looking flathead. And this is completely box stock. I'm not going to add any extra wiring or plumbing to it. It would improve the kit, but since I'm going to be posing this with the hood closed and the windshield down, you're never going to be able to see it. The only things that didn't quite look right to me are where the radiator hose just kind of stops at the radiator instead of having a proper connector there. So that's a little strange looking. And the horn was kind of a pain to mount. I ended up having to pin that because there wasn't really any good locator for it. And speaking of which, in the last video I mentioned how the front fenders to the chassis and the grille didn't have any good locators, and I recommended gluing the floor to the chassis and then building everything off of that. Is the way that it goes together, that would make things a lot easier, a lot less headache, and everything will line up much easier. But for the chassis, it's actually a pretty nice looking piece. I was particularly impressed with the front steering because as many pieces as that is, everything just went together nicely. There were no misfits, minimal cleanup required. It just really was impressive how that went together. And overall, it actually came together nicely. The only thing that didn't quite fit as I would have liked it to was the muffler, and that's because the muffler has a pin on it, but there's no corresponding socket or locator on the chassis, so you have to kind of guess where that's supposed to go. It's a little bit awkward, but you kind of eyeball where it looks best to the body and the rest of the exhaust pipe, and it goes together okay. It just needs some extra patience there. And you can also see I put flat spots on the tires. Now, there was a little bit of chassis torque, and that took care of the tires all touching the ground, but the bigger problem I had was the way that they were cast. The tires all looked hideously overinflated. They were just riding on the very tips of the treads, so that looked a little bit awkward. And doing it this way, it sits a lot more naturally. And round back, the jerry can, spare tire handles, all of that is straight out of the box. The only change I made was to these tabs right here, and that's because they were cast as part of the top irons, and since Kelly's Jeep didn't have the irons when the top was not on it, I cut these tabs off, added the clips at the very top, and then glued those directly to the body. And so speaking of modifications to make this a little more screen accurate, the biggest addition is the 30 cal here, which was taken out of the Hasegawa 24 scale Willys Jeep, and it's been upgraded with a brass barrel and resin ammo belt. I discovered a while ago that there are no upgrade parts for 24th scale Browning 30 cals, but there are plenty of upgrades available for 35th scale 50 cal, and as you can see, comparing the original kit supplied part to the brass, 35th scale 50 works out to a pretty reasonable 24th scale 30. So that was kind of a nice bit of serendipity that I've used on this and other kits. The yoke that the 30 cal is sitting in is also from the Hasegawa kit, as is the scabbard on the windshield. That was originally molded with the M1 rifle in it, but Kelly's Jeep didn't have that, so I cut that out of it. And so with these upgrades from the Hasegawa kit, you could quite reasonably ask why I didn't start with that kit. And the reason is because I'm an idiot. I forgot that I had that kit in my stash. So when I wanted to build a Jeep, I just grabbed the Italeri kit and ran with it. So let this be a lesson. Always double check your stash before you start building. Some other upgrades to make it a little more like Kelly's Jeep. Got some blackout headlights, and those are made by taking some wiggle eyes, like you get at the craft store, and punching them to the correct size, masking over the center with a little strip of tape, and painting them body color. It's not a very high-tech solution, but the end result looks pretty good. I also moved the rearview mirror up here on the fender, which there is a bracket back here on the cowl in the movie, but the mirror itself is on the fender. And that was one of the details that kind of made me stop and take a look at the Jeep and its overall role in the movie. If you haven't seen it, Kelly is a private, having been busted to that rank from lieutenant, but he still gets away with a lot more than a private should, including being able to drive around in his own Jeep. And the more I looked at some of the weird details on it, like the way that the mirror is mounted wrong, the way that the 30 cal yoke is done differently than it should be, the way that the markings are done, and so I kind of developed a headcanon where this is his own Jeep. It started its life as a standard Army issue, but it was damaged or written off in the field, and so he reacquisitioned it for his own personal use. So that explains why things like there's mismatched markings on the side. Some of the parts are put together like maybe they were field repaired instead of properly repaired. And mostly, that's why the back is full of all the contraband that he drives around with. The most famous of which is the gold bar, but I decided to have a little fun and add some other items to it. So I started doing that with some packs, also out of the Hasegawa Jeep. The ammo box that was originally supposed to be on the 30 cal before I put the resin ammo belt there. Down on the floor, some slightly less reputable stuff, a repurposed German ammo box that was off the Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade bike that I built, and a couple of bottles of booze there on the floor wrapped up in a blanket so that they won't get broken. So I'm going to be adding some more details on top of those, most of it just kind of boring tarps and bedrolls and that type of thing. And of course the pack with the gold bar is going to have to be the last thing to go in. And then once all those details are in, I'm going to weather the whole thing. So that'll be the next steps on this. Next week I will actually have the first update on the Resident Evil police car, but following that should be the finished video for this. So be sure to check back. Thanks for watching.